What is up, guys, and welcome to a bit of an irregular video over here where we're gonna be taking a bit of a visit into whatever this is supposed to be. I mean, the battle update, or so they call it, which is bringing a lot of interesting changes to battles. Nothing groundbreaking, but rather insightful, if I do say so myself. Now, this is coming alongside a lot of other content. I think it's going to be next week that's going to be arriving. These changes are going to be alongside a lot of additional factions and cultures and yada yada, but I'm not very interested in that. I'm not their target audience when it comes to that part of the update. The very first thing that they're going to go over with regards to battles is lethality, and I'm gonna read a bit over here and probably throw some gameplay footage just to not bore you over here by looking at me. But lethality, as this reads: when we embark on epic recreations of historical periods, one question is always at the forefront of our minds. How realistic should we make our interpretation? Well, I think there are other questions more important questions that should probably be on your mind, like is how do we make the game interesting? Anyway, I digress. With the Dynasties update, we want to shake up the formula adopted by past games and offer a completely new and optional way of playing battles. Okay. One which emphasizes the need to adopt a greater degree of tactical flexibility, encourages players to value the manpower at their. It honestly reads like a bit of like satire, like when you know the context of everything that's been going on with this series for quite some time. It does actually read like it's satire, but anyway, encourages players to value the manpower at their disposal and makes armies really feel like the lethal fighting force they are trained to be. We want you to be immersed in the reality of conflict or range units. Okay, whatever. Therefore, we're introducing a new feature to battles called lethality. It's not new. It's a reintroduction of a previous reintroduction. It's a repackaging of a repackaging, but we'll get to that in a bit. This new statistic gives an entity a percentage chance to kill an enemy entity in one successful hit. It works for both melee and ranged weapons and will be factored into all successful hits. However, the lethal blow chance will be reduced against higher armor values, as they naturally have a much greater degree of protection than their less armored counterparts. Implementing the lethal blow mechanic also provides an opportunity for further differentiating the strengths and flaws of weapons and units. For example, clubs in general now have a high hit chance and damage and whatever. That's not really that important. And they say that we're excited to hear about lethality, about how lethality. Okay, there's a typo over there. We're excited to hear about how lethality impacts your battle experience and can't wait to hear your feedback. For those of you who want a more traditional experience, this option can be turned on or off via. Oh my god. Right when you were about to make something that sounded mildly interesting, you just relegate it to another customization option. Like you're on the one hand, like this feels like, designed by committee, where they're trying to, somebody like one of the developers is trying to actually like improve the game. But then somebody from the business side, like one of those MBAs, comes in and is like, no, sorry, that might make the game too hard for people. It might too hard for people, and they might not like it. It might be too difficult for them. They might lose the battle. Just think of the calamity. There's that, but more importantly, the actual mechanic itself. It sounds overly complicated. It sounds like you're taking 5 extra steps to do something that was already done in past games. Now, for those of you who might lack context, because I know not everyone over here has played Thrones of Britannia. I know I have not played Thrones of Britannia. I'm sorry for the 3 Thrones of Britannia players sitting in the back, but this is a repackaging of Thrones of Britannia's critical hits, which is also a repackaging of a sad and botched repackaging of something that was standard fare in older Total War games. Those of you not aware of the history, Rome 2 introduced the health bars mechanic, replacing the old hit points mechanic. In older Total War games, most models in a unit had 1 hit point. There were some exceptions, like for more elite units, like hero units or war elephants that had 2 or 3 hit points, because obviously like it would be kind of bad if you invested that much in them and they would just die to 1 hit. But the general idea was that, and a soldier made an attack, it was either blocked or dodged, in which case it would deal no damage whatsoever, or it would hit, and in most cases, there was such thing as glancing blows, but in most cases, the hit would be lethal. It would deal 1 hit point of damage, which would kill the model. So, if you're wondering why battles feel less, or why actions during battles feel less decisive in modern Total War games, it's not just a placebo or some rose-tinted glasses you're wearing that you're just used to the older games. No, there is an actual like mechanical reason for that. It's the fact that health bars make most actions indecisive. It takes multiple missiles to kill a model in a unit. It takes multiple hits, multiple cavalry charges, and then also actions have inconsistent results visually because one cavalry charge, especially in the Warhammer games, because those look very visually impactful, but then you pay attention and realize 90% of the models are just standing back up. This all goes back to health bars. One of the worst, with regards to battles, one of the worst changes made by Rome 2. And the critical hits, and now the whole lethality mechanic really is just them attempting to course correct, perhaps, but they're not. It doesn't seem like they're doing it very well. I'll have to see how it works. Of course, I'm gonna revisit the game after this update is implemented, but that's not gonna be anytime soon. I mean, not in the next 2 weeks or 3, because I'm not gonna be here for that. So I will probably get back to see how well or how poorly they've done in that regard. The next topic on our list, realistic missile trajectories, another little gold nugget over here. Missile trajectory, as it reads, is an essential component to landing a killing blow upon the enemy, so we've done some extensive work to ensure that they interact and look more realistic. With the new update, you'll be able to use a new functionality which allows missile units to dynamically switch between more arcing shots that can travel further but deal less damage, and more direct shots which reduce range but deal a lot more damage and are significantly more lethal. This helps us to better reflect each missile weapon's historical usage and, along with the new lethality system, differentiate their gameplay purpose and open new tactical options for players to utilize in their battles. For example, placing archers behind the infantry line will make them use less powerful but still deadly arcing trajectories, because even though the friendly infantry is keeping them safe, they are also blocking their line of sight for the more lethal direct shots. But if the player places their archers on more elevated terrain, that will allow them to shoot at enemies directly and much more effectively while still being protected by the infantry front line. In addition, we have made it possible for players to lock ranged units into a specific type of trajectory or revert to the original dynamic you set anytime. Yeah, that was a real annoyance back in, I think, Medieval 2. I'm not sure about Rome 1. I'll have to ask in Discord, but I think Rome 1 was a lot less forgiving in terms of line of sights, like both for archers and for slingers. Like they would arc their shots slightly, but there wasn't any of like the crazy arcing that you see in Medieval 2, which was really stupid, especially when crossbows would do that in Medieval 2. It looked horrible, it looked stupid, and it just was a waste of ammo. So I mean, this is on paper, this is a really good change to see. I mean, I'm not going to give too much praise over here because it's been 21 or 22 years and we're still like this go-kart has been spinning around doing burnouts in circles since then. So we're not really, I wouldn't really call this progress. I would hesitate to call it progress, but it's something, I guess. Better late than never, maybe. I'll have to try this again when I come back to play the game and like do some battle tests. I have to see how big the damage drop off is. I have to see, first of all, they didn't really specify it over here, but I want to see if it's a case of reduced accuracy where more shots miss, or if it's just a case of reduced damage where you still have the same amount of shots hitting, but it's just a damage debuff. Next, we have the enhanced visibility section. In general, the overall visibility range of units has been reduced, but the ways in which you can gain a tactical advantage over your enemy has increased, which we're hoping will lead to a greater degree of strategic interplay. Some examples of this include forests, buildings, walls, and hills now block a greater degree of vision for all armies, meaning units will lose sight of their foes quicker if any of these map attributes are between you and them. This means there's a greater opportunity for ambushes to be laid, such as within tight confines of settlement streets. Elevation now provides improved visibility to units on the higher ground, allowing them to see over obstacles and intercept oncoming enemies on the lower ground earlier. On the flip side, units attacking a settlement from the low ground can see the units on the wall, but will not be able to distinguish the units on the other side of the settlements, and vice versa. Forests now have an added layer of depth. Units on the inside perimeter of a forest will be able to view the enemies out of it whilst remaining invisible, whilst units further away from the perimeter gain decreased visibility, meaning they partially or entirely lose sight of the enemy out with it. Again, like, oh my god, it's the same typo twice. Beyond this, unit types also play an increased role in how visibility has been implemented. For example, lighter units with the scout attributes can detect enemies from further, while heavier units don't have as much spatial awareness. Okay, that last part sounds just really gamey. I understand where the impetus for that is, because the idea is that scouts operate in fewer numbers and they can spread out more, and like they're less likely to be spotted. But the way that they described it over here is, as I expect, as always, it's just going to be some flat modifier that all units have. But regarding them, this whole like visibility mechanic, the line of sight mechanic is like one of the few positive things to come out of modern Total War. It started with Rome 2. It's the kind of thing that I wish like Shogun 2 or Follow the Samurai had, like the earlier games had, because it was kind of silly, especially for enemy archers, to be able to fire at units with the X-ray like accuracy, units they had no right to be able to see. But at the same time, ever since Rome 2, battle maps have become more and more featureless in general. Not siege battles, but open field battle maps have become just a lot more like featureless, a lot more plain. There's less potential for this mechanic to be used in like any interesting way. But that's pretty much it for what I really care about in this update. There's some updates to the battle maps. They become larger, but I don't think that the size of the battles, like the size of the battle maps in and of itself was a problem, because no matter how big they can make the battle maps, it doesn't change the fact that because of the health bar system, combat is, until this point, maybe the lethality thing will actually have... I mean, I'm not going to get my hopes up for that. It's a slim chance, but maybe the lethality will offer more of an incentive to actually use the map, because that's the thing. Even in previous games that did have larger maps, there just wasn't much of a reason to. There wasn't really much of a reason to use it anyway, because the armies were so small. Unless something else changes like fundamentally within the game's design, I don't see how having larger battle maps will really affect much. Other than that, I'm not really going to talk. I'm not even going to look into the whole, we have new factions, we have new cultures or whatever, because in case you're new to the channel, I don't really care about that stuff. I don't really care about counting factions or counting cultures if the core gameplay is just an uninspired mess, as it is currently in Pharaoh and previous games. And it pained my heart so much, especially during the pre-release hype cycle. Everyone going on forums talking about how there's so few factions. Like, if only they would add Mesopotamia or wherever into the game, and then maybe reduce the price to $40 if just they added some more factions that were prominent during that era. Guys, it is so far besides the point. It is so far besides the target. Okay, you're barking up the wrong tree. It's no wonder the games never actually address their core problems, because people just get the game they deserve at the end of the day. If they're going to keep on asking for more factions, then they're just going to get more factions without any updates or anything to address major problems with the gameplay. And then on the topic of faction variety or whatever, since I have not talked about Pharaoh in a long time, and it was fun covering it back when there was the new thing to talk about. I've seen sometimes in some YouTube videos an implication or an insinuation that, there's just not, we don't know that much in the era, or certain settings just aren't that good for Total War. Like, why did you go to this setting? You could have gone and done literally anything else. And I'd say, again, this seems to be part of some sort of like weird scarcity mindset that some Total War players have, where like the setting is just an all-encompassing constraint on how you can design the game, and the developers supposedly can't take their liberties with how they design it to make a fun game in the end, regardless of how interesting the setting is or the source material is. Which, the best Total War game and my favorite Total War game, which I've been doing some videos for recently on this channel, Follow the Samurai, and more people seem to be coming around to it. I see you, Andy's Take and Terminator, doing Total War Follow the Samurai videos within close proximity of one another, and Shogun 2 videos, wink wink. My point is that Follow the Samurai, if you actually read into the setting, the Boshin War, or Boshin War, however you pronounce it, there was, and I've read about it, I've read an entire book on it, there was not a lot happening in terms of combat. It was a very short conflict. The death toll was very low. The whole scale of the conflict, like, it's just nothing compared to most of the settings that Total War has covered. It's nothing compared to the Napoleonic Wars. So that just completely flies in the face of the argument. They can be creative. It's up to the developers at the end of the day to come up with something that's interesting. I don't think that we should look at the setting as an all-encompassing constraint or something that has to handcuff the developers. So that's my 2 cents on that, on the whole battle update and faction overview. I'll see you whenever I decide to investigate the scene of the crime.